Hello! Welcome to the Book Bar!
Cheers!
Cheers!
We are very excited. Today we are going to be interviewing Kylie Schachte.
From Your Next.
Right now we're going to play her trailer for you, so take a little peek.
There's my mouse. Right there.
There she
Yay!
is.
Hello, Kylie!
Hey, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So how's Portland?
Portland is good. You know, it's summertime. Not that we're really getting the chance to enjoy it, but part of what I love about living here is you're never like more than 20 minutes away from the woods. And so it's been nice to kind of get out and be on some secluded trails and be, you know, away from other people right now, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm grateful that we have space here where we can be outside and get some nature in without having to feel super claustrophobic with crowds.
Yes, you have gorgeous nature. Gorgeous. I've been there a few times. We're very jealous here in Houston.
Yes.
Gorgeous.
Yeah. I've lived a lot of places, but Oregon is definitely one of my favorites, and I think, in my very biased opinion, the prettiest.
Yes.
Yeah, we agree.
I'm from up north. I'm from Chicago. And
Okay.
so, yeah, and I've also spent a little bit of time in Tennessee, so Texas is not my favorite.
But we love you, Texas.
We do. It's just we only get like little cool weather, you know, for like 2 weeks, and that's about it.
And then it's gone. Well, we are here to talk about your debut novel, Your Next. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about your book?
Sure. So Your Next is a YA murder mystery. It's kind of like a film noir meets high school kind of thing. It's about a 16-year-old detective named Flora Calhoun who is obsessed with solving the murder of her ex-girlfriend Ava McQueen, even as, doing so unearths these pretty dark secrets lying underneath the surface of her seemingly very quiet, very pristine small town, and puts herself and everybody that she loves in increasingly more danger.
Awesome.
Yes, she does.
She does.
She sure does.
Yes, she does.
A lot of dubious decisions along the way, but gotta love her for it.
So your book launched in July. Can you tell our audience just a little bit about your journey to publishing? Because I know that's on everybody's minds, like how to get there.
Yeah, it's been a long one, and weirdly, I think, in the publishing world, our conception of what is long is actually very different from what normal people would think is long. So my path to publication is a 6-year story, and that is actually probably on the short side of things. So I started writing the book in 2014. I've been a writer all my life. Since the moment I could pick up a pencil, I've always just been a storyteller. It's always something that's come super naturally to me, and it never even occurred to me that I wouldn't write stories one day. So I started writing the story not really having any super clear ambitions around I definitely want to get published, or I want to be an author, this is the career that I want. I just started writing it. So this idea had popped into my head. I think I was writing it on my own, just kind of drafting and revising for a couple of years before somebody told me about the Pitch Wars mentorship program, which is a program in which you apply to get in, you work with a mentor for a period of a few months to revise, and in my case, completely rewrite your manuscript. And then it gets published in a showcase at the end where agents can see it and request to see more materials. So there's no guarantee that you end up with an agent at the end of it, but they're having quite a few big success stories that have come out of it. And so that's how I ultimately ended up finding my agent, and from there, worked with her to revise it, submit it to publishers, and ultimately it was picked up by Jimmy Patterson Books.
Not too shabby. Not too shabby.
How did that feel? What was that moment like?
Well, it was my birthday, and
awesome.
I'd heard, I had been on a trip with my best friend. Our birthdays are around the same time, and so we try and see each other in October every year if we can. And so we did a trip together to New Orleans, and while I was on the trip, I had gotten the news that there might be like an offer percolating somewhere in the future. And so the whole time I was there, as we're trying to like, stumble around New Orleans, these two girls like having a birthday celebration, I'm like frantically checking my email the entire time. So I got back home to Portland. We adopted a dog the day before my birthday, and the next day on my actual birthday, I woke up in the morning. I've been waking up, so I live on the West Coast, but publishing, of course, mostly takes place in New York, and so they're all on Eastern time. And so for weeks, I've been waking up at like 6 a.m. checking my email first, like not even setting an alarm, just like couldn't possibly stay sleeping any longer. So I woke up on my birthday at 6 a.m. And checked my email, and there was the confirmation that they were going to make an offer. And I immediately burst into tears.
Of course.
My husband was fast asleep because why would he have been awake at 6 a.m.? And so I like tried to sort of like nudge him awake, and he wasn't having it. And so I called my mom, of course, still hysterically crying. And I like couldn't get a word out. I was crying so hard. And so of course she goes straight into mom mode of like, what's wrong? Do you need me to come up there? Like, what's the matter? And was so pissed at me when I actually finally managed to get out what was happening. And I should say I'm not a big crier. Almost nothing makes me cry, but it was just like such an overwhelming surge of emotion. And so I think we had gotten the first news that they were thinking about making an offer the day that I had emailed this like dog rescue to see if we could adopt this particular dog, and we got the actual offer the day after we brought her home. And so as far as I'm concerned, like we had to keep her at that point.
So did you call your dog Flora or Cat?
No. No, I don't know that I could inflict that on my poor sweet dog. She's a very like anxious, very sweet Great Dane named Clementine, and she doesn't have a whole lot in common with Flora, I'll put it that way.
Well, that is an awesome story.
Yeah,
and what a way to celebrate it too, right on your birthday like that.
Yes, no kidding. But yeah, it was, I don't know, just to know that like somebody had read my book and loved it and wanted it to be out there in the world. I think writing, you do, even when you have great critique partners or whatever, you do most of it alone. It's happening in your head. I talk about this a lot, but there's this Stephen King writing craft book. In the first chapter, he talks about writing as like an act of telepathy, right? You have this like picture in your head that you're trying to convey, and you're trying to sort of transmit it to all these people that you don't know and will probably never meet, the same exact image, and just getting that confirmation that this image of this girl that I had had in my head for so long had been put in the heads of some editor who was like, yes, I want other people to read this. I think that this can sell, was just like the most magical feeling.
Yeah, I think only other writers understand the whole concept of like there's a bunch of people in your head talking and like telling you a story, and they're not going to stop until you actually put it down. But yeah, I can understand that. So how long of a process was it then from the time you heard that Jimmy Patterson was going to be the publisher, like to the time it actually
got in our hands?
Got right here.
Yeah. So I got the news that it was going to be, I got the offer news in October of 2018, and it came out in July of 2020. And that's pretty typical. If anything, maybe a little bit quick. So again, like publishing is just a wild place where like 2 years is a medium to short amount of time. So I've had people asking me if they could read my book or when my book is going to be on bookshelves since like 2015.
Right.
So yeah, it's been a 2-year process. Yeah, it's a long time to be waiting for sure.
Right.
Go ahead.
So I think I read something, I don't know if it was an interview I watched of you or something you wrote or whatever, that this went through a lot of edits. So how much of the story changed through all of that?
Yeah, so when I first wrote the book, the original draft that I submitted to Pitch Wars was a completely different story. So Flora was the same, some of the main characters, her family, Valentine, Ava, all existed in the story, but the actual plot was completely different. So I submitted it to Pitchforks. My wonderful mentor, who's the author, Amy Trueblood, she pretty much was like, I love the concept of this girl, but the actual mystery and the crime that you're having herself just really isn't working. And so she helped me to replot the entire thing at that point. So that was in 2017. The plot since then has stayed relatively the same. It's just been a matter of kind of fine-tuning and continuing to hone in on some of the elements that I think make it more emotionally resonant. So like the original version, the killer was totally different, the crime was totally different, all of that kind of stuff. And since then, since 2017, since I wrote that draft, it's been more of a process of honing in. I think, so at the time, Pitchforks was just a 2-month experience, and so I had 2 months to completely replot my book and rewrite it from scratch. Almost every scene was completely different. There's maybe like 5 scenes in the book currently that were in the original version. And so I was writing it just as fast as I possibly can. I was waking up at 4:30 every morning to write for 8 hours before I went to my day job, just so that I had enough time to get all the work that needed to be done. And so by the time I finished, I think the plot and the structure and all of that stuff was more or less in place, but I was just so tired and burnt out that I don't think it was like quite there yet in terms of what the story needed to be, and that's why it went through a few more rounds of revisions. It's pretty common for most writers. It depends on your agent and what their deal is, but most writers will go through a couple rounds of revision with their agent and then a couple of rounds of revision with their editor once they actually have a book deal. So that was pretty typical from there. But yeah, mostly a process of like fine-tuning.
Well, it's kind of a good segue into Flora, your main character, who is a bisexual teen, which we are so happy to see. There's this true shift in young adult that's happening right now, and we were very excited when we picked up your book initially, but how did she come about? I mean, we know when we write characters, they just kind of form themselves, but how did you mold her?
Yeah, so the original concept for her kind of popped straight into my head one night. I just had this idea about a teenage girl detective. I wrote, this is September of 2014, I wrote really quickly, just like a page. I had no idea what this girl's name was. I had no idea what her entire history or story was. But I wrote this really fast scene of her hiding while she's like eavesdropping on, I think it was like mobsters or something. And that was the idea I wanted to capture with her, of like this little 16-year-old girl who is sort of inherently fragile and vulnerable by society standards, who is putting herself in harm's way in order to like do something right in the world, and her fragility, her weakness, whatever you want to call it, is like its own source of strength, the way that people underestimate her, and the kind of savviness and the bravery that she brings to what she does in spite of that. So that was like the first thing that popped into my head. From there, I think it was a process of honing in on her voice. And so for the first probably year that I was working on the story, I was writing pretty much these just like random scenes. I had no idea how they were all going to fit together in a plot. I just kept putting her in these situations and trying to figure out what she sounded like. And that was really effective. I mean, for a long time, I was like thinking in Flora's voice. She and I have had like a pretty intimate relationship for these past 6 years. And then from there, I think, Flora is so much about this. There's kind of these two halves to her. One is this almost like persona that she puts on of the girl detective who is so like snarky and sarcastic and kind of hard edged, and she will just kind of like cut you down where you stand, and is more at home, I think, like running for her life than she is having any kind of like vulnerable or honest conversation about her emotions. The other half of Flora is this really tender, fragile, traumatized kid. Her backstory is that when she was 14, she went out for a run one morning and she found the brutally murdered body of one of her classmates. And that is what really the guy who did it ended up getting away with it. That's what sparked this obsession with justice. And, obviously that would screw up any kid. And I think, so there's kind of these like two warring parts of her personality, the kind of deeply hurt, traumatized part of her that inspires what she does, and then the like persona that she puts on as a shield to kind of protect that more tender, vulnerable part of herself. And so much of developing that character was finding the right balance between those two things, because it's way more fun to write the like girl detective part of it, right? Like to have her, you know, kicking doors in, or like, you know, running around, climbing fences, whatever it was that these scenes that I was putting her in, that was always the stuff that was more fun to write. But I think the only reason the story works is because it has that really fragile emotional vulnerability at the core of it. And so that was kind of the hardest and most arduous part of the journey, was to continue to bring myself closer into that.
Do you tend to identify like with Flora in that, or are any of your characters based off of anybody in your life? You know, I think Gramps is pretty cool.
I wish. I mean, I love my parents dearly, but like, who would have be raised by this like ex-CIA master faker? I think if you had asked me like 2 years ago, I would have said that the character I identify the most with is Cass. I think her sort of like deep empathy for other people, the way that she relates to people through, you know, compassion and listening and this sort of soft touch was all, and the way that she really puts other people's needs, most particularly Flora's, above her own. That was all stuff that I gave her very deliberately from myself, because it was really important to me that Cass, Flora's best friend, have her own agency, have her own, you know, very fully fleshed out character. She wasn't just going to be a sidekick, and I was having trouble figuring out how to bring that to life. And so something I often do with characters that I'm struggling with is I find some really deep emotional part of myself and give it to them, so that I can connect with them a little bit more. So that was the deal with Cass. But as I've kind of continued on this journey, and I'm so not like, you know, Flora can't talk about her emotions to save her life. She, you know, would always rather beat somebody up than have a conversation. Like, I'm so not that in any kind of way. But as I've gone on this journey with her, I have really come to understand how much the two of us are very similar in terms of the way that we deal with our emotions. We just have different outlets for it. So like Flora, when she doesn't feel like talking about her feelings, she, you know, goes off on some like wild adventure and puts herself in these really dangerous, reckless situations. That's not so much me. I avoid dealing with my feelings by completely focusing on somebody else's feelings. And so not only did I kind of have to have that realization about myself and how similar she and I were, I think that actually did help to even further draw out the nature of Flora and Cass's relationship, and how, even though they appear to be really different, they have kind of this core of similarity where Cass calls Flora out a lot for not dealing with her feelings, but Cass isn't doing such a great job of doing that herself either.
Yes. Very complex relationship. Very complex relationship, those two.
Yes. Yeah, I think the Cass and Flora relationship, I've talked about this a lot, was definitely the hardest part of the book to write. It was really important to me that their friendship not feel like, again, like a sidekick protagonist type of relationship. I didn't want Cass to just kind of be there as the support character. Not only because I felt like I really wanted her to have this really fully dimensional, fleshed out character, but also because I think it does more for Flora and her emotional growth, the fact that Cass is not just this kind of doormat for her. I mean, she is sometimes, but that has pretty deep and brutal consequences for their relationship that the two of them have to deal with all out for.
Well, Cass even calls her out on it and says, you know, you treat me as if I'm a sidekick, you know, so.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. And, you know, I think one of the big like epiphanies that I had in one of the revisions is like one of the earlier versions of the book. They have this big fight, they have this big falling out, but the book ends with the two of them making amends. And so one of the big epiphanies that I had in one of the revisions is like, well, what if their relationship is still kind of broken at the end, and we don't get to see. We have some hope that like there's maybe some resolution between the two of them in the future, but it's clear how much work Flora has to do to kind of earn Cass's trust back.
And one of the things I loved most about your book is there are so many relatable moments, especially between her family and her friends. Where did you come up with those? Do you just kind of sit and watch people? Do you just, the movie plays in your head and you go with it? How did those all come about for you? Or for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes I do draw from real life experiences. I think like the relationship between Flora and her younger sister Olive. I have two sisters, and in particular, like my younger sister and I were both still. My older sister was off at college by the time I made it to high school, but my younger sister and I were still in the house. And so I drew a lot from our relationship for Flora and Olive. I wasn't Flora level, but I was like a pretty troubled teen, to put it mildly. And my poor younger sister, I think, had to deal with a lot of the fallout of that, especially being the youngest in the family. So there's a scene that I don't think quite made it into the final book, but I think elements of it did, where Flora has some massive fight with her grandfather, and afterwards she's kind of back in her room licking her wounds, and her younger sister comes in with a like jar of like Sour Patch Kids or something, and the two of them just kind of like quietly share this thing of Sour Patch Kids together, and don't really talk very much. And that was like a real scene that happened between me and my younger sister when I was in high school. Like I'd gotten in this brutal fight with my mother, and my younger sister, who had like no idea what was going on, didn't really like understand what we were fighting about, just kind of came and shared her candy with me. And I don't think that precise detail made it in, but a lot of the kind of like quiet, we're here, we drive each other up a wall, sometimes we can't stand each other, I blame you for a lot of the bullshit going on in my life, but like when the chips are down, you'll come and sit next to me and share your candy. Like that really part of the Olive and Flora relationship is very much drawn from my relationship with my younger sister. I think I do think really cinematically about my writing. Most of my family works in the film industry, and kind of always grew up looking at TV and film and trying to understand the ways that stories were put together in that way. And so often for like big set piece scenes, I do have to like sit there with my eyes closed and kind of play out the scene. Certainly for big like action and fight scenes, but also I think for some of the really intense emotional scenes, to me, when I'm reading, what always makes those scenes come alive is when the details are really precise and sharp, and I couldn't have pictured them myself. So, something like the Sour Patch Kids thing, for instance, I, as a reader reading another book, like I would never have conjured that up in my own imagination. And when a writer can give me something like that, I feel like that's where a scene really comes to life. And so even those quieter scenes, but intensely emotional, I'm always trying to kind of close my eyes and play it through my head and think about like, what are the super specific details that only I am capable of imagining, and how can I pull them out and have them kind of reflect back the emotion in some sort of way?
Yeah.
So with having a family background like that in the film industry, have you ever thought of writing this as a script?
I have. It is. I mean,
can I?
I have. I don't know if I am the best person to adapt it. I think I would certainly be open to like working with a team to do that. But my dad is a film editor, and something he's always stressed to me. We talk a lot about art and storytelling together, and he is a really big believer in the art of collaboration, and how like you come to an artistic project with no ego. The people who are the best for the job do the job, and you bring the best ideas that you possibly can to the table, but you're also willing to like hear what other people have to say. And that's a really important value of mine when it comes to making art as well. So I think I would definitely love to be involved in the process of turning it into a film or a TV show. I wrote it hoping that would be the case. I still hope that will be the case. It's being shopped around right now. We'll see if anything good comes of it. I think I'd just be like so thrilled to see it made, that I'd be pretty flexible on what my personal involvement with that would be.
Yeah, my daughter is a actress. I mean, she's 7, but she's a little actress, and so I see scripts come across all the time, and we write together, and I always think, because when I write, I do see the whole thing in my head, like I see it playing out. I know the storyline, and I'm like, oh, this would be great, like
in a movie,
and so I've always thought, oh well, what if we did like adapt this to a screen? But completely different writing, you know, I mean,
Yep.
it's so much different, and it's so less detailed, you know, you like leave that to the actors. So that's, but I always think that's cool, and I would love, you know, for like a book to, you know, I love when books do turn into movies, because it's, I think it's just I think it's really fun for the author itself to like see the video they've run in their head, you know, come onto screen, and just just cool all around. That'd be awesome. That I would be pro, you know, your next movie.
Well, yeah, hopefully we can manifest it, because that would be wonderful.
We'll throw it out there to the internet.
Part of the reason too is I think so many of my favorite like book to TV or movie adaptations have gone off in kind of wildly different directions from the book in ways that often are very wonderful. I mean, I think about like the Gossip Girl adaptation is like nothing like the books, and but all the things that they discovered were things that came really naturally because of the chemistry between the actors or what have you, and those are things that I think as an author would be hard for me to let go of it being the way that I originally imagined it, but I would want to be open to it turning out in the best possible way.
Right. I just want to sit in the back corner, you know, and just like watch it play out, you know. Like,
yeah,
you know.
Exactly.
So is this your first novel? I mean, I know it's your first, like it's your debut, but I mean, like, is it the first thing you've written and you just kept going with it?
Yes. So this is the first book that I finished all the way through to the end. So like I said, I've been writing my whole life. I had started and stopped a few other projects prior to this one, but this is the first thing that I ever wrote particularly seriously, which is, I think, part of the reason why it took me so long to write it. I mean, I say 6 years, but really the first 4 of those years were mostly me just kind of digging around on my own and having no clue what I was doing. So I think hopefully the next one will go a little bit faster. But this is the first thing that I finished all the way through to the end. And I once I started with Flora, and once she got into my head, I really couldn't let go of her.
Mm-hmm. So why did you decide to write young adults?
I think it wasn't a super conscious decision originally. I have to say that I think a big part of that is my job in college, when I came home in the summers and on spring breaks, is I worked in the kids section of Barnes & Noble, and it was probably the best job I've ever had.
One of my favorite places.
The thing about the kids section, at least in the ones that I worked in, is there's no cash register back there, and so really my only job was shelving books and making recommendations. And so my boss, who was wonderful, said, anytime there's not like a customer here to deal with, just be reading books from the shelf, so that you can make really great recommendations. I was like, cool, being paid to read, no problem. And that was really when I started getting deep into reading young adult and middle grade and really fell in love with Kidlit. And I think we're starting to see a shift in adult fiction, I think, especially when you look at fantasy and sci-fi and some of the genre stuff. But I think what is really different about YA, and part of the reason why we see so much of the like book to movie adaptations come from young adult, is that young adult is written with this really like propulsive pace. There's not a ton of there's nothing wrong with literary fiction, and I certainly enjoy it, but the emphasis is so much on the language as opposed to the story. And I think just the way my brain works, the types of story ideas that come to me are these kind of like big, hooky, plot-focused stuff, and that, especially at the time that I started writing, was very much the purview of young adult. I also am just like a teenager at heart, I think, still. I work with teenage girls, and still feel so, I mean, it's getting embarrassing at this point because I'm 30. I really shouldn't relate so hard to being 17 anymore, but
we disagree.
Yeah. I know where I'm stuck. And so much of that like big emotion of being that age still feels so real and present to me that it felt like a natural fit.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. So it's probably just a personal question on my behalf, but like how, and I mean, you don't have to tell your number, but like how many submissions did you submit before you got your agent? Like, so
Or was it just Pitch Wars?
Yes.
Did you query?
I did a little bit of querying beforehand. I admittedly was really lost in the woods and like didn't have a whole lot of a clue about what I was doing. And so I probably sent around 20 or 30 queries. I was doing it pretty sporadically. Like I wasn't doing a super great job of like really being in the trenches and being super motivated. I was like, well, I finished this book. I don't really know what to do with it anymore. I know I'm supposed to be querying it, but I felt kind of aimless in doing it.
Was this
and so when somebody
was this before Pitch Wars? Okay.
Yeah, so this is early 2017. And a friend of mine told me about Pitch Wars, and I was like, well, cool. That seems like a thing to like. It'll feel like I'm being productive doing that, and it's sort of an excuse not to be querying. So I applied to that, and I should say I think I had a 0% request rate on my query prior to Pitch Wars. So like for all those people out there who are really struggling in the trenches right now, it is possible to get your book published with a 0% query rate. And so I applied to Pitch Wars. I got in. I did okay in the showcase. I didn't get like a ton of requests. I think it was like around 6. And so I sent out those 6 requests to see the full manuscript, as well as probably another, I would guess, 20 or so just like cold queries as well. And, you know, Pitch Wars is a sort of funny thing for people who are doing just sort of standard querying. It's very common for like months to go by with hearing nothing. Pitch Wars is sort of odd in that there's so much momentum around it that like I think the year that I went through it, somebody had an offer from an agent within a couple hours of the showcase ending. Like it moves so quickly, and you're watching all your friends get offers left and right. I think it felt like so much was passing me by, and I was not hearing back from any of the agents who had requested. In reality, it was only a month before an agent made an offer, which is no time at all in publishing, but it felt like I had like missed this huge opportunity. Because I think somebody even had like a book deal by the time I got my offer. It moves so fast, for some people at least. And so I was feeling kind of lost and directionless again. And after Pitch Wars, there is another thing hosted by the same people called PitMad, where you can pitch your book on Twitter. And so I wasn't really hearing back from any of these agents. I put out 3 pitches that day and got, again, like a couple of requests, nothing super crazy. And it ended up being, I think like a couple of weeks later, I ended up getting an offer of representation from one agent, and then a couple of others followed after that. So altogether, I probably queried somewhere in the neighborhood of like 50-ish people for the entire time that it was happening. And so from the moment I started querying to the moment I signed an agent was about a year, but there was that break for Pitch Wars in the middle there.
So the requests came from the Pitch Wars while you were just in that waiting period, not from PitMad?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I had a few requests from Pitch Wars and then a few requests from PitMad. And
I didn't mean requests, I meant offer. The offer.
Yeah, so I got one offer from a Pitch Wars agent and I think 2 offers from PitMad agents. The one I ended up signing with was one of the PitMad people. But I don't think I ever would have gotten the offers from PitMad had I not fixed the book as well as I did in Pitch Wars. So either way, I think Pitch Wars was really instrumental to my success.
So there are a lot of authors on the writing community and Twitter who are about to go through PitMad on September 3rd. What advice can you give to them? Those who are in the trenches and feeling the rejection, what would you say to them?
First of all, I would say, like, anytime one of these opportunities comes up, take it. Like, I understand the reluctance to put yourself out there. Like, it sucks, you know, when you are watching other people. And I went through that with both Pitch Wars and PitMad. You're watching other people get, in the case of PitMad, sometimes hundreds of requests from agents, and you've got 2 or maybe 0. Like, it sucks. It's not a great feeling. But you have, aside from, you know, your hurt feelings, which matter, but aside from that, you really have nothing to lose. And so I think it's always worth trying. And then the other piece of advice I would give is anytime you're given the opportunity to help out other people from your community by boosting their tweets, by hyping people, all of that, like, always take that. I think I didn't really understand the, like, depths of support that you could find in the online writing community until I got involved with Pitch Wars and PitMad. And since then, I have so many friends from my own Pitch Wars year, other writer friends who I've met on Twitter. And I'm not somebody who makes friends with people online super easily, but it has meant everything to have that kind of support. And so, and the way that I found that support for myself, and not to make it sound super mercenary or transactional, but the reason I found those people is because I showed up for other people too. And so I think there's real worth and value in doing that. And also, it's just like the right thing to do. As far as actually writing a pitch, I know other people don't always screw with this. I personally feel super strongly about having really great comps in your pitch. I think especially in like a Twitter format where agents are seeing hundreds of these things, it's hard to get them to stop and really read every word of what you're having. Of what you wrote, if you have something super clear at the top that can, it's like Jaws meets Dance Moms or whatever. I don't know where I even pulled that out of my head. That's really arresting for people. And it communicates, maybe not that exact example, but it communicates really quickly what exactly your book is without them having to actually read the entire pitch. And so I think the comps that you use for a pitch do not necessarily have to be the kinds of comps you would use in a query. So like in a query, you're trying to prove that your book has a market, and so you want to show other young adult books that are similar that would sit next to it on a bookshelf. In a pitch, you're really open to anything. So you can comp it to a song, you can comp it to a movie, you can comp it to anything you want. And so to me, that was the reason why I ended up getting requests in PitMad, was because I was using Riverdale meets Fight Club as my comp. It was such a good comp that it's still on the back cover of the book now. The publisher rather decided to run with it because it's intriguing enough to make you want to know more, or a comp can tell you really quickly what the book's all about. So to me, that's my best advice. I think I did a live Q&A with the author Sarah Nicholas and a few other PitMad, Pitch Wars type people on PitMad advice that I think people could hunt down. I think it's on Pub Talk Live if you want more detailed advice about how exactly to write a pitch.
Well, then let's just talk about this ending real quick. Without giving away any details.
Without spoiling anything here.
So,
what's next for our dear Flora?
Yeah, is there a next? I mean, is it coming? Is it in the works?
Okay.
We're professional at it, as you would imagine. The book was originally written as the first in a series, and it is still my hope that will be the case. It really depends on if enough people buy and like the book. So just going to keep manifesting that out into the world. There is
like the book.
Yes, there are links in our description for you to buy this book. Please go there now. Yeah, we need to see what's next here.
So I know what happens in book 2, and several other books that come after, but I definitely know what happens in book 2. I've written a little bit of it, but I think I get a lot of emotional DMs, I'll put it that way, about the ending of the book.
Definitely a book hangover, that is for sure. That is for sure.
I think that had I known more about how publishing works, I might have ended it. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't have ended it. Maybe I would have ended it in the same place. But I think that to me, the ending is about, yes, the book is this like big murder mystery. So much of it is about figuring out who the killer is, finding justice for Ava, this murdered girl. But the core of the story is this arc of emotional transformation for Flora, and the way that she learns to kind of come face to face with her own trauma and her own pain and not shy away from it. And so the end of the book started to be this kind of, you get the sense of how much she's changed and how much she's grown, and she's reaching back out to her family and her friends and all these people that she's alienated. And my feeling was like, well, that's easy to do when you've won, to feel like, okay, everything's finally okay, everything's settled. Now I can go back to Cass and I can go back to Gramps and Olive and apologize for my behavior because murder investigation's over, like back to normal life. And I think the big test of that is, well, it's one thing to say that you've changed and then to be really tested all over again and you have to prove it. So I won't give away, obviously, anything about the ending. I won't give away anything about what happens in book 2. But book 2 is very much about, in my mind, at least as it exists, is very much about her having to actually prove that she meant what she said when she told them that she changed and that she was going to be better now. And her having to figure out exactly what that means for herself, even when it is tested even more intensely than it is at the end of book 1.
Will be
my vague pitch for it.
Yes.
So if there's anything that you could tell your younger self writer, what would that piece of advice be?
I think the advice that I would give is to write what's fun. I think that's the reason why this is the first book that I finished, is because it's the first book that I've been writing, or the first project that I've been writing. So much of, I went to I studied creative writing at a fancy liberal arts college that has, great writing program. And, I took writing classes with a lot of the guy in your MFA types, where there's a big emphasis on literary fiction and in this very sort of pretentious kind of way. Also a lot of really wonderful and great writers. I don't mean to diminish it, and I got a great education there. But I think so much of I recently did a deep dive into a lot of my high school and college age writing. And I went into it kind of expecting it to be a lot cringier than it actually was, because I can't read things that I wrote a week ago without being oh. But what I was surprised to find as I went back and looked over a lot of this writing is a lot of the stuff that was that I thought would be really cringy, the really emotional, intense, you're in 9th grade writing poetry type of stuff. That actually was not the part that was the most awful and mortifying to read. I looked back at that and I was like, okay, obviously there was some craft stuff that I was still trying to figure out, but this is really powerful, the ability to really put your emotions down honestly on the page, and the fearless kind of way that you have when you're a teenager or young adult or whatever. The stuff that was the cringiest to me is when I was so obviously trying to emulate what I thought a good, important writer would do, and write this kind of pretentious crap, honestly. And there are glimmers underneath all of that of this really incisive, precise, emotional stuff, and this deep sense of empathy for the world. And that to me was where I really felt I could see the talent that I had even at a young age. But it was always the trying to be what I thought was a good writer, or what I thought the world would respect as a good writer, that was the most bullshit and stupid. And so the reason why even though I wrote this book, I finished writing this book over a year ago, the very last pass of edits on it. I haven't touched any of the words in it since. And the reason why I'm still able to go back over it and be actually, this is pretty good, I still like this, is because I wrote exactly what I wanted to read, what I thought would be enjoyable for me. And then I wrote what would actually be fun to write. That process of putting it down on the page was fun. And that made it easier for me to get up every morning and do it, or get up on my writing days and do it. So that would probably be my best advice to both my younger writers, and really any writer out there, is just do what you enjoy with it without any shame or pretension or feeling that you need to emulate something else.
So does that mean that you yourself have enjoyed reading thriller novels? Is that kind of where you decided I'm going to write thriller because I like to read thriller?
I love thrillers now. I actually was not a huge thriller reader prior to this. I got this like random idea for a girl detective, and I was like, I guess I better go start reading mysteries. I was almost exclusively reading like fantasy and maybe some like contemporary romance prior to this. So I was like totally unversed in mystery writing, whether that's adult, the classics, YA, whatever. So when I started writing it, I knew that I needed to do kind of a deep dive in the genre, and so I was reading almost exclusively mystery for probably the first year that I was writing it, and did all the classics. I watched all the like old mystery films, film noir. I really wanted to make sure that I knew the genre and the tropes of it kind of backwards and forwards. So yes, I love a lot of young adult mystery now. I love kind of like the big names, like Sadie by Courtney Summers is a favorite of mine. Obviously, One of Us Slime by Karen McManus is phenomenal. My fellow publishing sibling, I guess is how, but Derek Millman's Swipe Right for Murder is also great.
Right back here.
Another queer mystery that I adore. And also some like kind of more up and coming people. So Andrea Contos's Throwaway Girls, which is coming out next month, is excellent. Another kind of unlikable bisexual girl. I say unlikable in air quotes. Bisexual girl at the core of that mystery is really great. Hannah Capin, who wrote Foul Fair and Dead Queens Club, her stuff is really great as well. So I think now I love mystery and thriller, but it was not necessarily something that I had sought out a ton beforehand.
Do we want to do some questions? Yeah. We have some questions for you from some audience members.
Perfect. Yeah.
Let me pull those up real quick. All right.
Well, I have a quick question first. So back to Pitch Wars. What's the process of getting a mentor, and is that like, are they very choosy? Is it hard to get a mentor? And how do you choose the best mentor? Because just looking on their bios, it really doesn't give much about them per se, and like their likes or dislikes when it comes to genres.
Yeah, so I was a mentor last year. I'm also mentoring again this year. And so I've been on both sides of it. I would say, so the process of getting a mentor, and I would always recommend if people are interested in learning about this, they go check out the Pitch Wars site because they always have the most accurate information. But you apply to get in, you get to choose 4 mentors to apply to. And you send them essentially like a query package, so like your query in your first 10 pages, I believe a synopsis as well. And so they read that and based on that choose to make a full, same as an agent, make a full request. And so I would say as far as how to know who to apply to, they're not out yet for this year, but there will be, every mentor publishes a wish list of what exactly they're looking for. I think those come out on September 12th or 13th. Again, I would check the site for the most accurate dates. And they'll tell you all about what they like, what they don't like, what exactly they're looking for, all of that kind of stuff. So that's where you can get the best information about who to choose. And I would say, I know from both my own experience applying and being a mentor last year, that I know that I tended to really focus on the parts of their wish list that talked about what they like and don't like and what they want you to submit to them, which of course is important. Most mentors will also include a section that is about their editorial style and how they work with their mentee. And I would highly encourage people to pay very careful attention to that part as well, because the way that you work with a mentor and their editorial style is just as important as, whether they'll accept you or not, because the agent showcase at the end is really a wild card. Like you never know if you're going to find like millions of requests or 0 requests. There's really no way to predict that. The only thing you can predict is if you walk away at the end of the process with a stronger manuscript, and that is really dependent on the way that you work with your mentor. I mean, I know that I tended to like maybe glaze over some of that, like how we would work together stuff when I applied, but I would definitely encourage other people to not do that. And I would say, as far as being choosy, I got so many good manuscripts last year. Like, there were honestly dozens that I could have taken on and worked with. So it is tough. Ultimately, I ended up choosing the manuscript that I felt like I had the clearest idea of, like, here's how I could take this and turn it into a book that I know an agent is going to want to pick up. Because to me, you know, we're all doing this because we're trying to get traditionally published. And so I wanted to make sure I wasn't wasting anybody's time where I didn't feel like I know exactly how I can make this marketable. And so there were a lot of great manuscripts that were phenomenal that I was like, somebody is definitely going to want this. I just don't necessarily know how I am going to make it better. So it's not so much just, it definitely have to be choosy, but also I think it's about, you know, do I have a really clear plan for how I work on this?
And how many do you as a mentor take on? Just one?
Just one, yeah. So each mentor gets one mentee. Yeah, so I think last year we had somewhere in the vicinity of like 140 or 150 mentees altogether in the program. I think this year is probably going to be about the same.
Where do you find the time, Kylie?
Great question.
Right?
Excellent question.
Okay, so our first question is, what would you say is your most interesting writing quirk?
Work. Well, one of them is that I wake up at 4:30 in the morning to write, which I can't really recommend because it sucks. But
in the morning. I'm a night owl.
I'm right there. We'll get on Twitter together.
Only way I can write is like it's still dark out, nobody's bothering me. I'm kind of still in this like half delirium of being asleep, and so I'm not alert enough to be like self-judging, and so it's just like whatever's word vomiting out of me at that hour. I started doing it in pitch words just because I had to get up that early just to have enough hours in the day to do all the work that needed to be done, but it ended up working really well. The other thing that I do that was actually something that was recommended to me by my last year's Pitch Wars mentee. So I listen to these things called isochronic tones while I'm writing. So there's a site called mynoise.net, and it's like a white noise website. And they have this like tone generator called isochronic tones, and you can allegedly like change the tones to trigger different kinds of brain waves. So like some of them trigger more like fantasy and imagination, others make you more alert, others make you more anxious, whatever. I have no idea if it actually works, but it is like the world's best placebo. It helps so much while I'm writing. And it really, like this, when you hear the noise, you'll be like, dear God, this is the most annoying tone on the face of the planet. It sucks. But you tune it out almost instantly when you're listening to it on headphones, and it really does cancel out like really any atmospheric noise. You should listen to it on headphones because I know me personally, they scare the crap out of my dog. And so if I am listening to them just like sort of ambiently on the speaker, she will not leave me alone because she's so stressed out about what's going on. But that's my other kind of like weirdo writing thing. So shout out to Anne Freistat, my last year's Pitch Wars mentee, for introducing me to that.
That's funny.
Do you hear from your readers much, and where do you hear from them most? Through email or through social media?
Mostly through social media. I get a lot of, as I said, I get a lot of pointed DMs from people who have just finished the book, which I love, honestly. I joke about it, but it really does make me happy that people are connecting with the book, that they are feeling that gut punch of the ending, because obviously that's what I was going for. So I hear a lot from readers on social media. I would say I always love hearing from them, so like please do reach out on social media. So I get DMs from people. I have people just like tweet about the book. I've had a couple of people share some like fan art with me, which always just like nothing makes me happier than that. So if you have any kind of artistic sensibility whatsoever, here's my impassioned plea for more of that. But yeah, mostly through social media.
And one more. Describe your perfect book hero or heroine.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Describe your perfect book hero or heroine.
That is a great question. I mean, in some ways, when I'm thinking about like something that I would write, I guess like the good answer to this is that Flora kind of is that. I think that I worked those two halves of her that I was talking about before, this sort of vulnerability versus the hard shell, was something I worked really hard to make happen. And to me, like, I could live in her head all day, and watch the kind of antics and have her do, you know, like the totally bonkers, like picking locks, you know, sneaking up on people, all of that kind of stuff. But I also just like when she really loses control, and we get deep into the like pain that she's experiencing, like I could live in that world all the time. And that sort of like redemption arc, I guess, is something that I always find that I'm drawn to both as a writer and a reader. So both Flora and her love interest in the book Valentine have kind of similar arcs of, I mean, I guess you could call it redemption, although I think objectively they really don't have anything to be redeemed for, but I think they both obviously feel that they do. People who are very broken are kind of like trying to find their way back into the light, and are battling a lot of like very deep and wounded internal demons. Like I'm always drawn to that, and so definitely that's kind of what I go towards when I write. And I think also when I read, I love that kind of thing as well. Like I adore like Kaz Brecker from Six of Crows, you know, that kind of like there is something like at war within themselves, that they're kind of projecting outward, this maybe cool or detached or cynical persona, but inside is like a lot of turmoil.
Beautifully broken.
Right.
Yes.
I had a question. So I mean, I keep wanting to asking you the questions that you probably can't give me the answers to, but so
vague answers to them.
The storyline that you have in there of Lucy and finding Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
Is there ever going to be more of that story?
I think so. That I have less planned out. But yeah, I think there's definitely some resolution that still needs to happen there. I mean, I always think about, you know, when you look at a lot of like classic mystery, the point of the story is really the mystery and the solving of the puzzle. It's not really so much about the detective. Like often when you look at a lot of classic mysteries, adult mysteries, you don't even really necessarily know a ton about the personal and interior life of the detective. Mm-hmm. Obviously for me that's flipped. And so to me it's like the mystery is always in service of what it's telling us about Flora as a character. So to me, that whole mystery of what happened to Lucy and Matt Cain, this very wealthy, privileged man who Flora believes got away with her murder, I think there's still so much unfinished business there for her, that obviously holds so much weight over her psyche, that case went unsolved, that I don't think she can ever find sort of like the end of that arc for herself without having to come face to face with that again.
Right.
Just wondering.
Just curious.
Yeah, so I think that will probably be an undercurrent. I think there's still some things to future books, hopefully. There's still some things to wrap up with Ava's murder as well. I left a few of those threads kind of intentionally vague at the end. But I think there will also be like new mysteries to be solved in the future as well.
Very excited. Well, for those who are watching, we have links, again, to places where you can purchase Your Next by Kylie. We also have a link to Pitch Wars, and just for those of you who are interested in getting more information on that, we have a link to that as well. You can also subscribe to us. 2 lucky viewers today are going to get an autographed copy from...
We're going to keep them.
Yeah. So we will get that information out to Kylie so we can get that in the works. And
yes, so you have to follow Book Bar Authors on Twitter and Kylie on Twitter, and you have to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and you will be in the running for one of those
autographed copies.
Yes.
Well, Kylie, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so beneficial. There are so many writers who need to hear your story, those who are struggling, those who are unsure, those who are on the query trenches and just don't know what to do. They need to hear a story just like yours to just keep going. You know, it's it's a tough world.
Never ever give up, you know?
Never give up.
Because then you just get that call and it's James Patterson right there, you know? I mean...
And we are so excited for you. Congratulations on all your success. We cannot wait to see what is next or who is next in your continued journey. So
we want the inside scoop whenever that happens.
Definitely. Thank you so much, both of you, for having me. It's been so much fun. I always love talking about this stuff.
Yes, and we will see you on social media.
Yes.
We enjoy our little... Thanks again.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.
All right, so you heard it. Down in the bottom of all the details is all of the links where you can purchase Your Next by Miss Kylie Schachte. There is also a link to Pitch Wars if you are an author and you are interested in that program. Get on their website. The next, I believe the Mentors application, the process is at the end of September. So you heard Kylie say that their wish lists are going to open soon, so just keep checking. They're also on Twitter. And
we
then
have PitMad. PitMad is, she mentioned that. We have PitMad coming up on September 3rd. So mark your calendars for that. It's from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. There's rules for that. I think you can tweet your story 3 times. But it is a great opportunity to get your book out there. And she mentioned that she's a big fan of great comps. So be thinking about that above your pitch. Put in there so that'll catch some agents' eyes.
Yes, and obviously, dreams do come true.
They do. So, also remember to follow Book Bar Authors on Twitter, follow Kylie on Twitter, and subscribe to this page. And you could possibly be one of, I'm going to say we because I want to, you could possibly be one of the people to get a autographed copy of Your Next. So that would be amazing and fun.
Well, thank you for joining us. Tune in next time on September 26th. We will be speaking with PitMad sensation RJ Rogue.
He had over 1,500 retweets at the last PitMad for his story, and he has shared, so we can share. He has shared on Twitter that he has recently signed with an agent. So, you know,
another success story.
and it's because of the writing community, and you guys are amazing and supportive, and it's one of the best communities to be a part of. So keep supporting each other.
Yep, we are all in this together.
We are all in this together.
Tune in September 26th, 12 p.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Central.
And we will be talking with him and hearing his journey. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to the Book Bar.
Cheers.
Cheers.